Welcome back to the Catapult Effect podcast. I am your host, Katie Wrigley. I have a guest that I got so excited to introduce you to today, Dr. Karoline Fischer. She is a medical doctor turned energy healer and hypnotherapist, and she talks about what led her on that journey to expand out of the allopathic medical model and into more alternative and holistic treatments. I personally get so excited whenever I see doctors do this because it starts to add validity into these fields that were so formally thought as woo, but we are getting more and more science around the impact of how much energy healing, hypnotherapy, and other modalities and ways to access the subconscious mind can really deeply benefit you so much more than just the allopathic medical model could do. So I encourage you to listen to this episode and think about where you can apply what she's talking about into your life. And I also want to encourage you to reach out. So we're actually going to have a contest on this one. So please stay tuned to the episode and I hope you play. I'll see you guys soon. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Catapult Effect, a podcast where professionals like you turn challenges into opportunities for extraordinary growth. If you're tired of struggling, feeling lost, and ready to catapult yourself into the best version of you, then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Katie Wrigley.
Welcome back to the Catapult Effect podcast. I have such a cool guest with me anytime that I have seen medical doctors shift more into alternative healing methods. It is so powerful. And that is exactly who I have with me today, Dr. Karoline Fischer. She is a medical doctor turned RTT hypnotherapist. I'm going to let her tell you about that. I've actually done an RTT session. I didn't tell you that before, doctor. And she's also an emotional healer. Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Fischer. And I would love if you could just tell the audience what led you to move from being a medical doctor to becoming an RTT hypnotherapist and an emotional healer.
So thank you so much for welcoming me on your amazing show. Thank you for your kind words. I'm so excited to be here. And what moved me is really, I could say it in one sentence, I really have so much more to give in this profession than as a medical doctor. A little bit longer, my own story. I have been in therapy since I'm an adult, and I saw my life shift after working with RTT, after working with the subconscious. So I just saw firsthand how quickly it then turned. Whereas before, it didn't really move. I had a lot of awareness. I gained more awareness, but it did not transform my life, the awareness. It didn't make my life better. It didn't make my life freer. So it really is my own personal experience. And I've always been open. I always used to think outside the box, and I just wanted to find answers if I couldn't find them inside. And I love Western medicine, right? But it's limited in giving answers to emotional, to psychological, to anything psychosomatic, right? So I always explored outside of that.
Oh, I love that. I love it. And it makes sense, as you were saying that, I never really thought about the depth a doctor can go within the realms of the medical profession. If we're talking about like the allopathic model, there's very specific boundaries around what doctors can do. It makes so much sense because when we're talking about these alternative or these more holistic realms, it's so powerful, goes so much more deeper and really locks into the root. Like a lot of times as a medical doctor, I'm guessing you were probably dealing with the symptoms and you may not have ever had a chance of getting to the root. Is that right?
Yeah. And I think that's also a very, I'm looking for a word in English now, but a very accepted concept, I mean, and I also think there's nothing wrong with it, right? But it's just, what do you want, right?
Right.
And especially with emotional, psychological wounds, right? It's just, I mean, if you just suppress it or then use medication to suppress it, it's just going to wear you down, and it's like you can only go so far like that.
And your nervous system gets exhausted by keeping those things pushed down. That's what leads to this perpetual fight, or that's one of the things that leads to this perpetual fight or flight state, is this denial of what's going on at a deeper level. So there's two questions I want to make sure that we cover. And so I'll leave it to you what the order makes sense, but I want to go into what exactly RTT hypnotherapy is, and more specifically, using it for this inner child work and really explaining to the audience what inner child work is. So I don't know if it makes sense from your standpoint to go which one it goes into first. I'll give you carte blanche on that. And yeah, just dive in. I'm so curious.
Yeah, I think the way you just intuitively ranked them, not by importance, but just by, chronological order, which makes more sense, is I think I'll talk a little bit about RTT first, and then how to use the child work in the realm of that. So RTT hypnotherapy is a form of hypnotherapy that Marissa Peer created, and it's very powerful. And she actually really, or one of the focuses that she had and that I really felt drawn to, was the rapidness. Often when we hear rapid, we think, oh, it can't be good, can't be deep, right? And that's not the case. And that's really the power of that, right? Because she really said, if people have hard childhoods or have hard adulthoods or whatever, have hard phases in their lives, they shouldn't be then punished to doing lifelong therapy, because often it's said, right, if you have such a trauma, you need to go to therapy for your entire life, right? So she said, no, that can't be it, right? The situation happens fast often, right? What leaves us with trauma, and often trauma just is created by the inability of someone being there for you at the moment, right? By the overwhelm, by not being able to integrate it in the moment. If we always had a team of people around that could hold space for that, right? May it be our caregivers or some professionals, then we wouldn't develop a lot of the traumas, right? But so it happens in one moment. So it can also leave in one moment. Of course, it's a pattern until we work with it. But, patterns, if we are open, can just be reframed, reversed, transformed so easily, right? It's all energy. Energy can never be destroyed, but it can be transformed if we are open to it. So it really goes into the subconscious. It basically dives down, really gets you down into your subconscious, into the intelligence of your body, I call it, right? Intuition, you may call it, or that's how we know it in our, in our regular life, how we talk about it. And your consciousness will be aware and will be awake, but we are focusing on the subconscious. And then we'll work with it then, right? We'll work with that part of you that had a traumatic experience in the past. Sometimes people also use it just to gain more awareness of their life, right? They might not even want to work with trauma, but they want to just become more free in their expression, right? So it really is healing, but it's also expanding your horizon. You can really do so many things. And the inner child work comes in here now, right? Because if I go into the subconscious and I ask the subconscious, why do I have this or that issue today, right? I could say, okay, I have such low self-esteem today. I don't know what it is. I know I'm smart. I know I'm this. I know I'm beautiful. I know I'm creative. I know all those things, but on some level I don't, because I undersell myself. I barely scrape by on all levels of my life. I don't have good relationships, right? What's going on? And so then we go in with that question, right? And we ask the subconscious mind of that person that might feel that way, why am I underselling myself? Why don't I see my worth on that emotional level, right? And then scenes pop up, right? And I always say scenes, the more senses you engage, the better. Some people see, hear, feel. Some people even smell the scene, right? And scenes, really, your subconscious is so unbiased, it gives you the right scene. So scenes come up that are the reason for you being stuck today, for you being presenting the issue today. And then we connect with that younger self that pops up in that scene, right? That is in that scene. And we let that younger self, often it's the inner child, because often it goes really back to childhood, yeah? And we let that child talk, and we let it express what it felt in that moment. We give it space to express everything that it could not express, hence
Yep.
suppressed, right? Could not internalize what had happened, right? Is missing part of their own development, basically, is missing part of their own life. It's almost like it didn't happen, but it happened, right? But it's not integrated yet, or not integrated in a wholesome way. And then we let that express, right? All the feelings that came up. And we also reframe. We give back. If we internalized someone else's belief, they might have miscommunicated. They might not have even meant bad, right? But we might have misunderstood also. And sometimes it's really just trauma perpetuated from generation to generation, right? Because that's how what person A learned, so they pass it on to the next generation, and then they pass it on to the next generation if the cycle is not broken, right? And then we really break that cycle, right? We say, okay, I'll give that back to you. I'm not internalizing that shame anymore. I'm not internalizing that worthlessness anymore, and we give it back without blaming, right? I always say there's no blame at all. I take an adult really as a responsible person. I think that's the respect that every adult human being deserves, right?
Mhm.
Not going to say, oh, you are like this because of this and this and this, right? No, you are responsible for your own life, but there's explanations, and we'll just make it better, right? Like, we give that back. No
Yeah.
blaming. No, like, they acted the way they could, right? They did the best they could. Everybody usually does in a family system, right?
Yeah.
And we give that back, so we don't internalize it anymore, and that changes your entire life, right? Because it changes your inner child. So if my inner child is changed in the position that, it's in me, right? Every age up until the age I'm today, I have in me, right? So I have my 5-year-old in me. I have my inner child of all ages in me. So if one of those parts or all of those parts are healed, then I'm integrating that healed version of the inner child. And that changes me totally, right? It, it just gives me different affirmations from deep inside. It's
Yes.
a wholesome feeling from inside. And
Ah,
it's really like, and we talked about that shortly, right? Before we
yes.
even went on, that it's really, you can't go back and change the past, but hypnotherapy actually has the same effect, because you can go back in your memory and connect with that inner child and change what the incident made that inner child believe about themselves. And that's the
Yes.
same.
Yes. And I love what you just said there, and what, we were saying before we hit record. And thank you. Thank you for going into those details. I learned a lot just listening to you. I think I may have actually done something different than RTT, but what you're talking about was, we're accessing the subconscious mind. And just so listeners understand, the best way, like, we can say, oh, your subconscious runs 90 to 95% of what you do in a day. We don't really get that. But when you say, okay, your conscious mind can hold about as much as what can go on this little piece of paper here, but your subconscious mind has the power to get a rocket to the moon and back. So we're talking Post-it note versus rocket launcher. Big difference in power, right? And so much of what's in that subconscious is making you do things you're not conscious of that are working against you. And so we can't change linear time to go back, but by utilizing, there's a quantum effect here. And when you get into that quantum field, again, this is all backed with science, it's not woo. You
Exactly.
get into that quantum field, you can change the past in the present. You can change the future in the present by accessing the quantum field. You can have exponential growth in a fraction of a second when you're tapping into the quantum field. And that's what Dr. Fischer is talking about here, is changing the past through the quantum field by accessing the subconscious mind.
And that's what you just so beautifully described scientifically, like, so amazing. Yeah. Beautiful.
And, it's funny because it still cracks me up, because I'm so bought into healing, and I am a lifelong healer. I'm never going to end this journey. Like you said, like, not everybody has to be in therapy. I'm not in therapy, but I use my cognitive movement ball all the time to help myself continue to move forward, because the more angst I heal in myself, the happier I am and the more I have to give other people. So I'm like, well, I just want to see how good life can get. So I'm not going to stop. Not everybody's like that though. But what's funny is that I still have resistance to anything new, or I may have some ideas of how much someone can help me. And so I actually went to someone last year to do some pelvic floor work. Like, I'm about to turn 50. I've talked about that a few times. And as women know, our bladders get a little less reliable when we reach middle age. It's a lot of fun. Like, you can sneeze wrong and whoops, okay, let me just go change my pants real quick. And so I went and did pelvic work with her. And she's very intuitive. She's incredible at what she does. And in one of the sessions, like, I wound up having a huge emotional release because we went into inner child work, because she was explaining how much of that energy stays in the womb. And so as she's got her hand on my tummy and she's connecting the energy she feels there, and she's walking me through this really powerful inner child work where, again, I had a huge emotional release and came out of that with so much peace that I have been a huge fan of inner child work. And I've done it through parts work. I've done it in ceremony. I've done it through cognitive movement. I've pulled that in and helped other clients with that. It is so powerful. So it may sound like weird, and just give it a shot, because it is amazing what can happen in the course of like a half an hour. Like, we're not talking like that rapid thing. She's not kidding. It really happens quickly because we're tapping into universal laws, scientifically proven, and utilizing them to give your physical existence less suffering and more peace.
Totally. And what you just brought up, two things actually, right? The body, right? You worked with your pelvic floor. So what I always say, there's no, like you said before, often people still think, oh, it's woo, but you have a material, right? We're working with your body. So how can it be woo, right? You feel it in your body. I mean, in your brain, it can be sometimes more woo, because I can change my thoughts. I can push something back that is not so comfortable, and I can make something up, right? We have an ego that directs a little sensors, right? But my body, it's so unbiased. Like, if you feel it in your body, how much more real can you be? You can't be any more real, right? So if it's happening in the body, it's real, and that change is happening there, right? That inner child is in your body. And then the second point that you said with the 10 and 90%, that was so beautiful also. And I also sometimes say, because sometimes people ask me, well, how do I know if something is unhealed or something, right? And I'm like, if you, and here's the 10 and 90 again, right? If you go through life and it's, you have a regular day and you go to work, or you work from home, or you play with your kids, or you cook, or you do whatever you do, and then something happens or somebody says something, and you all of a sudden are totally triggered and have an upheaval somehow, and you don't control from your consciousness anymore. It shows that your subconscious was triggered. And there is something subconsciously unhealed. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such a strong reaction, right? Like, for example, when people really hurt other people, right? Like, I mean, unfortunately, I can't believe I'm going there, but homicides happen, right? I'm not sure if a lot of people really want to kill someone, right? Like here, right? But they get triggered, and the emotion takes over, right? And they just feel that's the solution, because that would make them feel better. I don't know why, right? I mean, because, and as a observer, we can't understand, because we are not in that situation, because that's also the 90%. And when we heal those 90%, the 90% doesn't need to react like that anymore, right? Because we all felt that. We react and we feel like, oh my God, we are a kid again. We can't control ourselves. Like, we do things that we don't want to do, that we are too mature to do, that we are ashamed to do, right? From our conscience. So that really is also, you can heal that. You can align that, where you actually act aligned to who you know you are in your conscious life. Yeah, right?
Yep. I love that you actually brought up homicide as an example, because I work with a lot of first responders, and mostly police officers at this point, retired and current. And I asked a retired police detective who was on the force for 20 years, and she's still within a law enforcement family. And I asked her, I said, how many, because she had this weird fluke dog attacking her. And she was like, the owner had pure evil, Katie. And I was like, how many times have you seen pure evil? Because I'm thinking, she's been a cop for 20 years. She's seen a lot. And she's like, only one other time besides this.
Wow.
And I was like,
Wow.
really? She goes, even the murderers, they just made bad decisions. And they just made their life worse and they regret it. She's like, most of them aren't actually evil. I'm like, that's really surprising. You know, and what's happening in the brain. I just want to kind of take a moment here. And there's a difference between understandable and acceptable. So please understand, as I'm explaining what happens in someone's mind when they get triggered like that, I'm not saying that the actions are acceptable. I'm not condoning it. But when you get triggered, you have this thing called the prefrontal cortex. And for those of you watching, I'm just going to give a little visual here. So I've got my fist and my fingers are covering my thumb. When we get triggered, we literally blow our top. And the fingers are our prefrontal cortex. This is our executive center that doesn't even start to grow in the brain until age 7 and 12 and doesn't stop until you're in your 20s. This is what keeps us in rational thought, allows us to be reasonable. It is the executive center of the brain. When it goes offline, all you've got, the thumb is your amygdala. The amygdala is scanning for danger. So when you don't have the prefrontal cortex over that amygdala to give context to it, everything's a threat, including the person who's right in front of you. And so your subconscious is telling you in that moment, the only way out of there safe is for them to die. It's not accurate. And it's not okay. It is understandable. And also we lose function in the left brain, which is the analytical side. The right brain takes over, which is the emotional side. So now you've got your emotions saying everything is a danger and you're not safe.
Yeah.
And that's why we want to stop this level of trauma that we see out there and use whatever methods we have available to heal the trauma. So we have less people blowing their lids and doing things that they regret that will literally change the course of their life. Why not take the time to heal instead? Reach out to Dr. Fischer for an appointment and we'll make sure we know how and where people can access you. And instead of blowing your top and being in a potentially life-changing negative circumstance, put yourself into a life-changing healing session instead. And I can assure you, you're going to feel a hell of a lot better after a session with her than giving into your emotions, because we never feel good when we give into our emotions, ever. Not the negative ones. At least I don't.
Not when they're not aligned with us, right? Not when there's something we get triggered and we don't know how to control it, because then they are really some ancient in the sense of ancient in our life. It has been. Yeah. It's not happening now, right? It's triggering something that happened before.
Right. And your subconscious doesn't care if it's reasonable, it's rational. Your subconscious is there to keep you safe and alive. No small feat. They've got basically dual purpose. You need to be safe and alive. That's all it cares about with you. In a healthy mind, even in an unhealthy mind, obviously we get to a point where there's a point of no return and we get into a suicidal brain, which is not what I'm talking about here. That's a whole other thing. But there's a lot that happens before those brains get to that point. And there is a lot that we can do to reverse any damage that body, that nervous system has gone through the events of their life. And inner child work in hypnotherapy is an amazing way to be able to access that and heal it out of the body and out of your psyche for good.
Exactly.
Anything else? Is there anything else you want to add?
No. It's just, I mean, what came up also, right? I mean, it's just like you put it so perfectly, and also the experiences you brought up with the police and with first responders. But and just to also counter with less, extreme examples, right? I could be in a relationship and I know my partner loves me, right? And then they could say something or do something, and all of a sudden I get triggered. And I don't know. I question if that person still loves me, or if I can trust that person, right? Although I know I can trust them. I've trusted them for so long. But when we get triggered, it's so strong, right? It's like alarm system that wants to keep you safe, like you said, and it reminds you of something that happened in the past, right? And and ideally that partner can just assure us that we are safe with them, right?
Yep.
But um,
Yeah.
if that's not enough, right, then really very tragic things can happen also.
Yeah. And if you are someone who knows you get triggered, you're not sure if you're ready for help, the best thing you can do in those situations right now, walk away. If you don't trust yourself to talk, it is better to just walk away and explain later. You can explain later, but get yourself out of that situation if you don't trust yourself not to do something that you're going to regret. Just remove yourself immediately. Even like if it is your wife, your husband, your kids, whatever, just, I need a minute. I will be right back. Go.
Yeah.
Don't ask permission. Just leave. Give yourself space. Yeah. Give your nervous system time to unwind and examine it without the aspect of threat. Please, if you can at all, get yourself out of that situation and let yourself have a minute. Give yourself the gift of time. Let your nervous system process it. Let that prefrontal cortex come back in, give you some reason, remind you how much you love your family, you love the person you're having the conflict with, whatever it may be. Give yourself that space, please. And also reach out to Dr. Fischer to get a session so that you can help. So where can people reach you? And do you have any limits with who you can work with in the world at all?
My website is, I'm going to start with that, is www.whyhypnotherapy.com. And the Y is spelled W-H-Y.
Okay.
So, and there are really no limits. I give free consultations. So I offer free consultations, and usually people take a free consultation. And in that consultation, we decide if we want to work together, right? The client and I. But there are really no limits as in issues that we can work with, because it's really so powerful. So, for any issue, really.
And it can be done virtually, so anyone in the world can reach out as long as time zones can align somehow. Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
I work at the moment. Yeah. And it works so perfectly. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. And we'll make sure that we have that in the show notes. And then is there any projects that you've been working on that you would like to share with the audience as well?
No, apart from, doing a lot of podcast interviews at the moment. My clients or the issues and the work I do are my projects. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we were highlighting what you need to highlight. Yeah. And so we were actually talking ahead of the show, and Dr. Fischer was actually saying, oh, how fun would it be to kind of do a competition? And so we are going to be giving away, with her permission, it's totally her idea. We're going to be giving away a free session with her to the first person who leaves this podcast a review specifically around this episode. So I'll be able to see the order the reviews come in. I'll get notices straight away. So the first person who leaves us a 5-star review around this episode, so you want to comment on something that Dr. Fischer taught you, to be able to win, and I will connect you with her direct. Well, actually, you'll be able to connect with her directly, but I will give the backing of, yes, this is the winner, and they get the free session. So I thought that was such a great way to help you get some skin in the game and actually give this a shot without it being any investment for you. So you can try this inner child work, see what you think of it. And all you have to do is leave me a review, which I really appreciate too. And it helps other people hear about this podcast as well, so that they can learn the same valuable things that you've learned.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I'm excited to do it. Are there any last notes or any call to action that you have, Doctor, for anybody who's listening, who knows that they've been through a lot in their childhood? They may be afraid to review it, but they think it would help, but they're scared. Maybe they're in resistance to it. What would you say to that person?
I think the thing is really connecting with body. That's really, for me, right? You can do it through the breath or through just, meditation. I think that's so essential. And we do that in hypnotherapy too. But if you wanted to, because if you wanted to work on yourself by yourself, right? It's always, everything is going through the body, right? The body keeps score. So
Yep.
you just focus on your body and go into your body, right? If you feel safe in your body, right? A lot of trauma survivors don't feel safe in their bodies, right?
No.
And then
Or
if you feel there, or if you feel, then obviously get help, right? But it's really the body is, the healing goes through the body. That's my main thing that I would give if I had to give one thing.
Yeah. And so I love that, because if you start to talk to your body, you will realize there is nothing to fear there. And that your resistance and the fear around whatever it is that's lying underneath the covers that you can't quite see yet, please believe me when I say that is way harder for you to navigate than opening up that door and looking and seeing what's behind it. And I'm speaking from not only my own personal experience, but experience I've seen with client after client, with people who have been in ceremony with me, who are terrified to face things, who face it, release it, all this amazing stuff happens. I've heard the same release come out of hypnotherapy clients. So just tapping into that body, that is one of the best ways to realize that there's nothing that your brain is going to reveal that's scary, that is any worse than what you are already dealing with.
Yeah. But still having that, I think, that acceptance that it's also okay to feel that fear, right? Because that also helps you cope and survive, or whatever comes up, that resistance, right? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. The fear.
Acknowledging it. Yeah.
Right. And the nervous system doesn't like change, which is immediately at a juxtaposition with the universe, because the one universal constant is change. So that becomes tricky for us as human beings. You don't want that trauma to be the familiar thing that the nervous system is relying on to feel safe. You want to teach it that it can be safe in a flexible, resourceful, peaceful state. And it's not going to happen overnight. But Dr. Fischer is one of the people who's qualified to help you get there faster. So your suffering window is much smaller and you can get back to enjoying life and feeling fully you so much faster. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Fischer. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it so much too. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you, audience, for being with us. I know you have your choice of so much to listen to out there on the internet, and I am really honored that you chose to spend your time and your energy with us today. And I hope you're going to come back again next week for another awesome episode. And until then, please be well. All right, just over 30 minutes. That was so fun.
Oh, that was so good. Thank you so much. Wow. I learned so much in every conversation I have. It was beautiful. And I actually really liked how I looked now too.
Yeah,
So
you look fabulous.
Because by now I should know it. After so many interviews, I should know how to do that. Great. Thank you. Where are you located again? Oh, okay. So same time zone, New York. Yeah. Perfect. Nice. Austria. Yeah. Wow, you're good, but you are good, because I actually worked also on, being as slight as possible in my accent, but you still detected the right country. So big ups. Oh, wow. Wow. Mm. Uh-huh. Yeah. That's true. I mean, yeah, that's since I'm here and I work for myself, I think I don't realize that, but yeah, that's how it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Amazing. Yeah. 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 Yeah, totally, totally. It is. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. So yeah, that you also. Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your expertise because you have been working in this field for a long time. So I'm really, it's priceless. Thank you. Mm. Yeah. Oh, oh, thank you. Thank you for giving me that perspective, because yeah, I don't talk to any other RTT specialist that does podcasts. So yeah, I didn't know how they would present. Or yeah. Uh, like body. Mm-hmm. Um, it came up sometimes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh, you know, I was supposed to do with her, and then she had some personal things come up, and then we canceled. And then I think maybe I should follow up again. Yeah, because then it didn't happen. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, per- perfect. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend and leave a 5-star review, which helps grow the podcast and reach others just like you. While you're at it, connect with Katie on social media. You can find her on LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram as at Coach KT Dubs. That's COACHKTDUBS. This has been the Catapult Effect with Katie Wrigley. Thanks for listening.